In this video, we're going to show you how to successfully remove and reattach the interchangeable barrel systems on the G&P transformer line of AEG. I've got two of them right here in front of me for demonstration purposes, but we really only need one. So this G&P transformer is set up just about how I like it. It's got a minimal gap between the rail of the barrel and the body right there. Just to demonstrate how the front end is removed from the rifle, you pull on this tab right here, and then you can rotate it counterclockwise, and it comes right out, and then there's your hop up. Now this barrel assembly is very unique in that it can rotate 360 degrees. You notice that the hop up stays right there, doesn't move. Where people sometimes have difficulty is in successfully reattaching this back to the rifle. I'll show you what happens if I do it incorrectly. So first things first is this hop up does need to be oriented correctly. You notice that it has a hole on just one side, not this hole, that's where the nozzle goes in, but the BBs have to come in here, which means they need to come from the magazine. So this hole needs to be oriented in this direction. So I'm gonna get that right, but I'm gonna get something else wrong. So let's put that in, and then I'm going to, first off, I'm rotating it in the incorrect direction, but if I don't successfully attach it, there. You see what happened? The rail is no longer lined up with the body, but I didn't change anything. Well, that just comes down to how this system is designed, and you do have to, when you're reattaching it, do it in the correct way in order to avoid something like this. So let's go ahead and undo that, and I'll talk you through the process here. So first things first, you're gonna wanna check to make sure this collar right here, this is the collar that the system swivels around, but the collar attaches onto the receiver, and it's still got standard receiver threads under there. You wanna make sure this collar is tightened all the way down. If it's not, see how this one's a little bit loose? If it was loose, that would mess everything up. So you're best advised to put a little bit of Loctite on here and then tighten it all the way down. You can get this nice and snug. Say if you were installing this on a new upper receiver. So you get that snug. Now this is important. So you start with it oriented the same way. The hop up, top of the hop up, top of the rail, bottom of the hop up, bottom of the rail. And the top of the rail always coincides with this detent right here, which is what interfaces with the hole where the gas tube would normally go into right there on the top of the upper receiver. Then you're going to rotate the barrel in relation to the hop up. You're going to rotate it 90 degrees clockwise. So that way, if you're looking down at the top of the hop up, the top of the rail is 90 degrees off to the right. Another way to think about it is if you're looking at the top of the rail, the hole that the BBs come in is going to be on the right side. So what this is going to do is this is going to allow me to properly realign my rail with my upper receiver once I put it back together. The way you put it back together is you get the hop up aligned with the rest of the body. So the bottom of the hop up right here needs to be able to accept BBs from the magazine. So you get that lined up. You can push that all the way in until it stops, and you're gonna keep applying pressure as you then rotate this clockwise, and just like magic, it's going to line up. Now you notice that I'm gonna have to pull on this detent right here, and it clicks right into position. And there you go, back in business. Let me get the other one just to demonstrate for you. Here's the other rifle. I'm going to do the same thing. Notice it's all in one piece. Everything is nice and lined up. There is a minimum, well, there's a little bit of gap right there. I'm going to show you how to adjust that here in just a bit. Right now, we're focusing on just getting everything aligned once we take it off and put it back on again. So I'm going to take it off by pulling on that and rotating counterclockwise, and bada bing, bada boom, comes right off. There we go. And once again, you'll notice that this can rotate freely around the hop up. I'm holding onto the hop up, and this can rotate. You can do that as many times as you want. It's not going to unscrew. Once again, I'm going to start off with everything lined up. Top of the hop up, top of the rail, bottom of the hop up, bottom of the rail. I hold the hop up, here's the top, and I rotate the top of the rail clockwise, 90 degrees. So now, if the hop up is straight up and down, the barrel has been, or the rail has been rotated 90 degrees clockwise. So here is the front of the barrel, and off to the right side, you can see the hole that the BBs go in. So we're going to, once again, make sure that this collar is locked all the way down. Again, you should Loctite this and make sure that it's nice and snug, so that shouldn't move. So with the hop up oriented correctly, push that in. It should slot all the way in. Then you apply pressure this way, grab, push, rotate, and it should line up. Now you notice that there's a huge gap right there right now. I'm gonna try that again. So off to the right. Oh, I did that wrong. There we go. Just like that. And pressure. Hey, look at that. So it takes a little bit of practice, but eventually you get used to it. The big thing is, if you think about this in number of rotations or degrees, it is 180 plus 90, so 270. So it's a 270 degree rotation. And sometimes I find that it helps, once I get it lined up for that 270 degree rotation, if I back it off just a little bit, then I push and I rotate and it threads in just like that. Bada bing, bada boom. And GMP's whole marketing scheme with these is that you can take a shorter barrel and a longer barrel, and you can swap them out with the same body and gearbox. That way you don't have to have an entirely different rifle, just a new front end assembly. Or if you buy this rail kit along with that collar and you put it on a different body, you're going to have to tune it for adjustment. And that tuning comes in with these screws, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's 8 screws that lock the rail onto the collar. And if you look at these holes, you'll notice that these holes are not perfectly circular, they're a little bit oblong. That allows you to loosen the screws and slide the rail forward or backward to adjust for that gap. So I'm gonna do that right now with this. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna loosen these screws one at a time, and you don't have to do it all the way. Oh, and it's also a good idea, whenever you have screws that are in a radial or circular pattern, always do opposites like I am right now. So if I do this one, I then go and I do the opposite one. That way you avoid any sort of warping or tweaking of the rail. All right, so I've loosened all 8 screws. And now I'm just going to push this rail nice and snug back against the receiver so there's no gap. I'm gonna start tightening these things down. Flip this over, and again, pull this rail back and tighten this down. Once you get the first 2 locked in, the rest is just making sure everything's nice and secure. And there we go. So now I've got even less of a gap right there. I'm gonna bring this closer to the camera. So now I've got even less of a gap right there. Let's see if I can do this for the camera. So in order to quick disconnect, I pull on, it's on both sides. I pull on that, and then I rotate it counterclockwise, so this way, and it comes right off. And then there is the hop-up unit. One thing about these hop-up units is this brass bushing right here, or like a cap, actually holds the adjustment wheel onto the hop-up, and sometimes this can get a little bit loose. A little bit of thread lock might, and be careful with your thread lock so you don't get it on the adjustment wheel or anything, but occasionally this will get a little bit loose, so just make sure that's snug on there. So a little bit of blue thread lock might help you there. Anyway, so here's the barrel and the hop-up unit. You can see that I can just rotate this as much as I want, and nothing is happening to anything. It's designed to do that. So I'm going to set this up correctly. Once again, I've got everything lined up in line, so top, top, bottom, bottom. Then I hold onto the hop-up and I rotate the barrel clockwise 90 degrees. Then here's the mag well. There's the hole that the mag feeds into. So there's the hole in the hop-up. Line that up like that. And I push as I rotate. And there we go. Everything's lined up, and that is pretty well locked in there. Now, because this is a removable barrel system, it's never going to be as stable, like 100% rock solid as a non-removable, but that's the trade-off you make. You get a removable, adjustable systems, you can go CQB to outdoors. That's the trade-off, is a little bit of stability. But you know what? Credit where credit is due. This is very solid, way more solid than a lot of cheaper stock guns for sure. So now let's talk about swapping the barrels entirely. Sometimes you can run into fitment issues. So here we've run into the issue where I tried to take this rail off of the other rifle and put it onto this body. And you notice that things are kind of out of whack. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to unthread this and make sure that I've got everything lined up properly. I'm going to try my method again. So there we go. I'm set up for a 270-degree rotation. Put it in. Apply pressure and rotate. Hey, there we go. Now it almost lines up. Almost, not 100%. Let's try again. This time let's go a little bit less. So put that in. Pressure and rotate. Okay, so you can see that now we're running into a completely different issue where even though I'm following all of the directions and instructions, it's just not quite working out or lining up. Obviously, this is not going to turn anymore. So this is a good representation of what it might look like if you just tried to throw this assembly onto a rifle without any sort of adjustment or tuning whatsoever. And you might have to adjust where these screws are located on the barrel nut. I'm going to show you how to do that right now. So what you're going to need is a 2.5 millimeter hex key, and that will take care of all 8 of these screws. So I'll take those off right now. All right, so what I've done is I have taken all of the screws out of the rail and I've slid it off of the outer barrel here. Here is that barrel nut that I was telling you about. All right, here's a better look at that barrel nut, and you'll see that it has all of these different screws. That's so you can get it to line up just right with the holes on the rail. So let's pretend that this is my outer barrel and I was installing this kit on a new rifle and I got the hop-up assembly installed and everything and it's all compatible. So first things first, I would put the collar on right there. I would Loctite it, snug it down. That should be as tight as you can make it. Then what you'd want to do is install this without the rail. Make sure that this is snugged up as much as you can, but not so tight that you can't undo it. Okay, and the hop-up's all lined up. I was just checking that. Nice. All right, then you would take your rail, get it over your outer barrel, and what you would want to do is get it lined up as best you can with those holes. Now look, those holes are pretty much perfectly lined up for being snug all the way down and this being flush. If that wasn't the case, what you could do is rotate it just enough to locate the nearest hole, but you'd want to do that on the rifle's left side. So where I'm going with this is, let's say that if I lined up the rail flush and I didn't see a screw hole right there, what I want to do is I'd want to go looking for the next hole on the clockwise side. So I would turn this clockwise until, oh, I found another hole right there. And then I would install the screws with that hole, unthread it, and then when you put it back together, it should lock up. Let's go ahead and simulate that right now. So let's say that this was, that was loose right there. That was tight. So what's happened here is you can see that the rail is perfectly aligned and it's nice and flush. I'm holding it back against the body, but the holes don't necessarily line up. So what you're going to have to do is rotate this to find the next hole. Here's the key. You do not want to look for the hole on the counterclockwise side. That is the right side of the rifle. Do not turn this to the right, because if you do, then this is never going to snug up perfectly. What you want to do is try to find the next hole on the clockwise side. So you rotate this, I'm going to have to pull it back just a little bit, and you rotate it this way until you find those next holes. You might have to kind of snug it up against the receiver and find the next holes. There they are. So that's step one, is find the nearest threading holes that line up with your rail. Before we go any further, I did want to point out that these screws, notice are different lengths. Shorter screws go in front, longer screws go in back. Remember that. So at this point, take a longer screw and put it in the back. And I'm gonna tighten it. Well, I'm not gonna tighten it. I'm just gonna install it almost all the way down. Then I'm gonna go on the other side and I'm gonna do the same thing. And I'm gonna go almost all the way, but not 100% tight. And honestly, you might as well just go ahead and thread in all 8 of these screws. So I'm gonna do that right now. Again, long ones in back. Okay, there we go. I've got all 8 screws installed, but they're not tightened all the way down. I haven't tightened them all yet. They're pretty loose. You'll notice that that's already lined up right there. So the next part is just gonna be to check to make sure that it'll fit. So the screws are a little loose, but that's okay. They just don't have to be tightened down all the way. So again, start with it top of the hop up, top of the rail, rotate 90 degrees clockwise, install, apply pressure and turn. And you notice that it's binding up a little bit, so when that happens, I just kind of back off a little bit and then reapply a little bit of pressure, just get those threads lined up, and there we go. And look, it's starting to line up just perfectly. But I see that there's a little bit of a gap there. I see that there's a little bit of a gap there between the rail and the receiver that I don't necessarily like. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to loosen the screws just enough to let me push this rail back against the receiver and then really lock down those screws. So I'm gonna do that right now. So just make sure that my screws are not super tight. And because they weren't tight to begin with, I don't necessarily have to worry about the radial pattern. They were just tight enough to help me get everything. Notice I'm only backing them off like a half turn or so. There we go. So now you can see that the rail can slide a fair amount. Let's bring that in. See that the rail can slide a fair amount. So I push and then I'm gonna tighten those screws down. All right, and there we go. Everything's nice and tightened down. As you can see, there's almost no gap right there. Let's take this apart. All right, so that's the gun for storage purposes, whatever. And now let's put it back on using the 3/4 method. Top of the rail, top of the hop up, rotate 90 degrees clockwise. Install it, pressure, rotate. There we go. Now we're nice and solid and locked up. And that is how you successfully uninstall and reinstall the barrel system on a GMP transformer AEG. And it's also how you adjust and tune your rail system to fit whatever body you're trying to install it on. One last little tip, a little bit of blue Loctite on each of these 8 screws that hold everything together would probably be beneficial. Just remove one at a time, apply Loctite, reinstall, and then you'll be good to go once you get everything tuned the way you like it. Well guys, that wraps up this video. If you have any other questions or need any assistance, make sure you contact us. Info in the video description. Of course, you can always find our contact information on evike.com. See you later.